Here are 15 of the best Ask Reddit stories for today. I hope you enjoy and remember to subscribe. It really helps us out. We post new videos every day.
What are some very creepy facts? A fire whirl can go as big as an F3 tornado. In 1923, such happened in Japan during an earthquake. The son of a bitch killed 38,000 people in less than 15 minutes. In 1975, the CIA had a heart attack gun. It kills people and then the dart denigrates. Just imagine what is classified now. There's a spider that gives you a 3-hour-long erection. Before you die from its bite, the erection it gives you is very painful. Crocodiles can gallop like a horse. I don't like knowing this, so I am cursing you people with this knowledge as well. Fortunately, alligators cannot. Remember that bath salts cannibal guy from a couple years back? He wasn't high on bath salts when he did that. That was just media speculation and BS. They only found pot in his system during the autopsy. We still have no idea why he flipped out. There's a parasite that enters a fish's mouth, eats the tongue, and replaces itself as the fish's new tongue. Humans' eyes don't reflect light at night like animals do. I like to say this fact to my wife at a campfire.
People who have legally killed someone in self-defense. What is your story? I was working as a bouncer at a GOY bar downtown, had this drunk skip out on his tab at another bar and they called our bar to warn us. Sure enough, he was sitting in one of our booths just kind of existing. Manager that night tells me to haul his ass out because he's not welcome, so I do. He then stands outside the door I'm working just non-stop yelling next to me, constantly poking at me and insulting me and kicking my ankles. Dumb childish shit. At one point he grabbed the cord from my earpiece by my collar and snapped it, so he got a solid boot to the balls and dropped to his knee for a minute or two. Then went back to being a complete and utter dildo like he had been. I am very patient. He was annoying, but I have a little brother and lots of younger cousins, so he was no worse than what I had growing up. This lasted a good half hour or so before out of nowhere while I'm checking IDs I feel hands around my throat and they start to squeeze. Didn't even think, just spun around, swung at face height, popping him solidly in the mouth and grabbed him by the hair and bounced his face off the brick wall next to me. 4 or 5 guys who were watching the whole thing grabbed him and he's just standing there still throwing insults at all of us in a complete drunken state, blood running from his face. And like a gift from above, a police cruiser does a roll by and I flagged him down real fast. Cop gets out, asks what's going on. I give him a quick rundown. He asks what happened to the guy's face. I told him I punched him and bounced him off the wall after he grabbed my throat. Cop cuffs and stuffs him and I never saw him darkening our doorway again. I'd like to think he sobered up in the drunk tank and reassessed his life, but he probably just went to be obnoxious at a bar without a doorman.
National Park Rangers, what's the strangest thing you've seen or heard while on the job? Where do I begin? I seen 2 guys in a moose costume ride on breeding season. That wouldn't even hit top 10, though. The 12-foot bear-looking creature on its hind legs, anywhere it was, became icy. The next morning, it disappeared and the ice remained. This was in July. I used to work as a security in the summer and there is a road where deer will often cross to get food. And I saw a deer cut it in half with blood everywhere. They classified it as a car accident, but it was definitely not a car nor a predator. My brother worked 2 seasons in Yosemite in hospitality. Worked 6 days a week and would trail run on his 1 day off. Almost without fail, as he was running out of the valley, he would encounter guests that would ask for help. And if he would give them his water. Many times, he would still be in the first mile of his run and could literally point to the lodge and say, "Just walk that direction." Other things. What time do they let the animals out? When do they turn off the waterfall? Right at sunset one day, we had a call for a woman in all white crying on the boardwalk. When we got there, a number of people described a distraught woman in an old-fashioned dress wandering the boardwalks, crying. Apparently, she didn't react or respond to anyone trying to talk to her. We looked for a while and never found anyone. Not the weirdest story in the world, but was an odd one. Not a ranger, but I was a 911 operator and answered a call of a report of a small girl walking a path through a national park at night by herself. It was the ranger that was seemingly so spooked at the situation. He wouldn't approach the victim. I assured him it was alright and all and could hear him hesitantly call out a couple times, but he sounded scared. I let him know officers would be there soon and about 10 minutes later the FRS got in contact with me again and said they found him walking back on the path, white as a ghost and unable to recount anything he's seen. He said he saw a girl and had no information otherwise. I never heard much more about it, but they launched a search team and everything and never found anyone. I don't know if it's relevant, but it's always freaked me the fuck out thinking about it. I did some volunteer work helping clear brush in Texas state parks a couple times a year and we came across a trail of 6 dead animals that looked like they were torn to shreds. Pretty common, as Texas has mountain cats and coyotes. This was different though. They led off trail and into this dried up ravine where 2 armadillo bodies were lying, spread open on a rock with blood and entrails everywhere. They ended up calling the ranger to come down and inspect it. Turns out he experienced that kind of thing occasionally, but never more than 1 or 2 bodies. The animals weren't hunted, they were sacrificed by kids who used to sneak into the park at night and do rituals. After searching the area with him, guess what we found? Some animal entrails nailed to a tree. Below the tree, the grass was cleared and a little rock formation was made at its base. I didn't think people actually did that crap.
It would be cool if after you died you could see the top 5 times you almost died. And a kill cam.
What's the worst case of rich kid syndrome you've seen? A 12-year-old family friend. Got an iPhone XS for his birthday, then deliberately shattered his iPhone 8. In high school a kid was bragging that he got in his third fender bender in his old car, 3 years old, that his parents gave him but he hated, so his parents were buying him an entirely new, current year, car to incentivize him to drive better. My mom's friend used to buy new clothes each season and throw out the old ones. She had to be taught by her husband to save them for the next year. Edit, this happened way back in the 50s. Her family was very rich, and he was just a normal guy. A guy looked at my $2,000 beater car in college and commented that it must have been really cheap and guessed $15,000. Edit, for anyone curious, it was a Kia Rio 2005 with 120k miles on it. I worked at a Starbucks and we hired a new guy, who I was training. At one point, I had to show him how to clean the restrooms. I grabbed the bleach, and hand him a pair of gloves and he looks at me in disgust and says, "We don't have a maid to clean the bathrooms?" He quit the next day lol. I knew a girl whose allowance was $90 a day. She got into trouble so they cut it to $90 a week.
What are the best romantic relationship tips? The wise man, married for many years, gave his newlywed son this advice. One day you are going to be driving home from the bar at 2 a.m., having missed dinner and never called your wife. Despite still being drunk, you will turn off the lights of your car and the engine and roll silently into the driveway. But no matter how softly you tiptoe up the door and silently enter the house, your wife will come running down the stairs screaming like a banshee demanding answers. Instead of trying to sneak in, rev the engine loud, come screaming down the street and with the squeal of tires and brakes, pull into the driveway. Then stomp up the stairs and throw the door open so it slams into the wall and yell up the stairs, "Honey, I'm home, and I'm ready for some good lovin'." I guarantee she will pretend to be fast asleep.
What is a really weird fact that makes people say, "Why do you know that?" Clostridium botulinum is a bacteria that, when an animal or human gets infected with it, can paralyze the entire body. Sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it does, sometimes it's very fast. Sometimes it take multiple years. Infections are mainly through food and is lethal in about 5% of cases. If left unattended, the lethality is quite high, especially because it can cause the airways to stop functioning. It acts by blocking nerve functions by binding itself to the neuromuscular junctions of your nerves. It doesn't destroy them like with other illnesses, so after treatment, or after the bacteria has vanished, I'm not 100% sure that can happen though, the paralysis will go away. Although it can take up to a year before that happens, you have no natural resistance against it, and after you have gotten it, you can just get it again.
What were you taught incorrectly when you were a child? I was never taught proper hygiene. My mother was an aloof alcoholic. I rarely took showers between 7 and 16. I knew nothing about the proper care of my body, especially after puberty hit when I was 14. For example, I went years without washing my hair. It looked like I had Brill cream or grease in my hair, but it was all natural oil due to years from never having washed it. One day when I was 16, I visited a friend's house. My friend's mother, Mrs. Hayworth, a strong character, took one look at me and asked me when was the last time I had washed my hair. I replied I could not remember. She immediately brought me into the bathroom. Next, she had me bend down next to the bathtub spigot. She then made sure the water coming out of the tap was a lukewarm temperature. She then placed my head under the tap, soaked it and then applied shampoo. She scrubbed my hair and scalp thoroughly. After she had finished, she gave me a towel. When my hair dried, it was light and puffy. I had never seen it look that way before. I learned a great lesson that day. I still owe Mrs. Hayworth a debt of gratitude. P.S. Mrs. Hayworth was the first person I ever met who was not shy to tell people she was a practicing witch.
Reddit, what is the worst party you have ever attended? An office Christmas party, not an officially sanctioned company event, but an informal gathering at a coworker's house. No bosses were there. At some point my wife looked at me and said, "You're drunk, you need to get home." Now, I don't know what made her say that. I'm not an obnoxious drunk. I don't get into arguments with people or say outrageous things. I might have been slurring my words a little, but I wasn't on the point of falling down or throwing up. But I trusted her judgment, so I let her drive me home. I was drunk enough that I went straight to bed and fell sound asleep. So what did my wife do? She went back to the party without me, and ended up making out with one of my co-workers. This was my first wife. One of the many graduation parties I went to after high school. It was an awesome party for an hour or so, then some 17-year-old showed up with her baby, and kept insisting people keep it down so she could get the baby to sleep and have some time to herself and to party. Cleared out pretty fast.
What was the most unexpected knock you got on your door? I had a knock on my door around 3 a.m. It was a police officer and my nephew who was a town council person. They told me they had bad news. My brother-in-law had a terrible car accident and died instantly. My wife came down the stairs and they repeated the terrible news. They said he had no ID on him but it was his car. They said he's a little over 6 feet tall with a wolf tattoo on his arm. We confirmed that is true. They asked me to come to the morgue in a few hours to identify the body once they cleaned him up. They pulled the sheet down and I stared at him for a while. There were similarities but it wasn't him. They were amazed and then asked if I could look at his passenger who was also killed. They apologized they hadn't cleaned him up yet. They unzipped the body bag. I told them that wasn't him either. They asked me who is it. I told them I had no idea. We would later find out that 2 guys took my brother-in-law's car while he was asleep. They went to buy drugs, drove way too fast around a curve and totaled the car, both dying instantly. The driver had the same tattoo as my brother-in-law.
I'm just going to watch Shrek in my head. As a little kid, I was so damn obsessed with Shrek. I mean the kind of obsessed where I'd watch it over and over again days in a row. It was all I ever wanted to watch. It got to the point where I had memorized it word for word, and beat for beat. This meant that, somehow, I could watch it in my head timed perfectly. No fast forwarding, no skipping. Now this was fine for car trips and such, because my dad would be like, hey, do you want some coloring and to do? And I'd be like, nah, I'm going to watch Shrek in my head. Occasionally my dad would ask where I was up to in the movie just to check on me. You're probably thinking, huh, that's weird but cool I guess? Wrong, sort of. It got so bad that I'd watch it in my head at night before I went to sleep. My dad would literally check on me at night, notice I was blankly staring up at the ceiling, and have to yell stop watching Shrek and go to sleep. I can't remember how this faded from being one of my abilities, but it sure was cool while it lasted. But for a while, Shrek really was my life. What's your best story from a wedding? When I was in high school, my best male friend and I had a mutual close female friend. We used to spend every Sunday with her and hang out at her house. One day she asked if we wanted to spend the night and we said your parents are cool with that. 2 guys staying with their daughter? And she said yeah, so we started spending the night at her place from time to time. Flash forward years later, she's getting married and she invites both of us. Neither one of us has a date so we agree to go together. At the reception her dad comes up to us, a smile beaming across his face, and he shouts our names and says, "Holy shit, I can't believe you guys are still together. That's amazing. So proud of you guys for sticking it out. You were always my favorite couple." We're left completely stunned and confused. When our friend makes our way to us, we ask what the hell her dad was talking about and she breaks down almost into tears from how hard she is laughing. That is when she finally told us that she told her parents we were gay and a couple in high school and that is why we were allowed to stay at her house. All these years her dad was convinced we were a couple and after seeing us together at her wedding, nothing will ever change his mind. Am I the asshole for showing my missing eye to the new teacher after he told me my bangs are disrespectful? I had an accident when I was a baby and I lost my left eye. I don't have an eye socket I could put a fake eye in. It's just normal skin and some scars on a big pock of my face. The right side and the bottom half of my face is completely normal. I have big side bangs that hide the left side of my face so I don't freak anyone out and I don't get weird looks. I've been going to the same school since I was 5, so the teachers and the kids know about it. We got a new teacher this week. He started by asking us to go around and introduce ourselves. When it got to me, he was rude and asked me, "Do your parents know you come to school looking like this? It's extremely disrespectful. Fix your bangs, I want to see your face." So I obeyed and tucked my bangs behind my ear, showing the left side of my face. He gasped, his face turned red, my classmates laughed and he told me that I can let my bangs down. Later that day, my head teacher came to me to scold me. She told me I was wrong to shock the new teacher and I should have just told him about it. Did I do anything wrong? I just obeyed his orders. It's not my fault he ended up not wanting to look at my face. Am I the asshole? What's the weirdest compliment you've ever been given? That I'm like a piece of furniture, don't do much but you notice when I'm not there. You are so tan, how did you get so tanned? I'm Indian. With the right makeup you'd make a really good looking girl, I'm a guy by the way. Your freckles are so sexy. They remind me of my sister. Is it just me, or does anyone else post something on their Snapchat story in hopes that a certain person will reply to that story and start a conversation with you because you're too afraid to text them directly? What is the most toxic thing a parent can say to a child? That I'm freaking useless and can't do shit because I couldn't open a jar of tomato sauce for my mom at 1 a.m. I kicked your mom out and I can kick you out as well. My mom laughed at me when I said that I most likely have a mental illness or a disorder. Then she asked me if my grades were okay and I said yes, then she replied that it's okay. I've been asking her to get me therapy for almost 7 years now. Constantly comparing you with your older siblings, and extremely different treatment. It makes you feel inferior to them and like no matter how much you try or do, it will never be enough.